The people recorded in the Bible were not superheroes. They were thieves, Moses, prostitutes, Rahab, traitors, Peter, people tired of life, Elijah. God is not looking for perfect people. He is looking for people willing to be broken so that he can rebuild them. Even the Son of God had to be broken, his body torn, his honor shattered, his soul feeling abandoned by his Father, so that from that brokenness all of humanity could be redeemed. It was in the dark cave of shame that David learned to write Psalms. It was in prison that Joseph realized his childhood dream. And it was on the cross that Christ opened the way to resurrection. This is not the end, it is a painful transformation into the indestructible version of you that God has created for you. Have you ever wrestled with a profound, soul-stirring question? Why does God, the omnipotent Creator, often bypass the outwardly strong, the accomplished, the seemingly perfect candidates for his work, and instead choose those who are broken? Those whose lives seem to be in pieces, teetering on the edge of collapse. It's a question that can challenge our conventional understanding of strength and success. The truth, when it dawns, can be both shocking and profoundly comforting. Before God elevates you, before he entrusts you with his grand designs, he often allows a period of deep, transformative breaking. This isn't a cruel act of a distant deity. It's not about tearing you down to discard you. No, this breaking is a sacred prerequisite for a divine remaking. It's the dismantling of the old self, with its flawed foundations and self-reliant structures, to make way for something new, something infused with his power and reflecting his glory. If you're currently navigating a season of shattering, where everything you've built seems to be crumbling, understand this: you may not be experiencing God's abandonment, but his intricate preparation. You are not being destroyed. You are being meticulously prepared for a purpose far greater than you can currently imagine. This is where we see the divine crack effect. Think of the Japanese art of kintsugi, where broken pottery is repaired with lacquer laced with gold. The repaired piece isn't just restored. It's considered more beautiful and valuable because it was broken. Its history of fracture, now traced in shimmering gold, becomes a testament to resilience and transformation. Similarly, our personal cracks, our wounds, our failures, our moments of being utterly underneath, not meant to be hidden in shame. When surrendered to God, these very fissures become the conduits through which his light, his grace, and his strength can shine most brilliantly, both within us and out to a watching world. This breaking often serves to adjust our spiritual vision. Consider Elisha's servant in 2 Kings 6. Faced with the overwhelming might of the Aramean army, he saw only defeat and cried out in terror, "Oh no, my Lord, what shall we do?" 2 Kings 6:15, 9v. His sight was limited to the dire physical circumstances, but Elisha, whose spiritual eyes were attuned to a greater reality, prayed, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." And the Lord opened the servant's eyes, and he saw the hills ablaze with horses and chariots of fire, God's heavenly host surrounding them. 2 Kings 6:17, Nivli. Sometimes it is precisely when our human strength fails, when our worldly supports are broken, that our spiritual eyes are opened. We are forced to look beyond the visible, to perceive the unseen power and unwavering presence of God that far outweighs any earthly predicament. Our perceived vulnerability becomes the very catalyst for a deeper, more accurate sight. The path of brokenness is undeniably hard. It tests the limits of our endurance and faith. But embedded within this arduous process is a divine intentionality. What if the moments you feel most fractured are not the end of your story, but the crucial foundational work for a new chapter, a chapter where you emerge stronger, wiser, and more profoundly aligned with God's extraordinary purpose for your life? You are not merely surviving a breakdown. You are on the cusp of a breakthrough, being fashioned into a vessel of honor, prepared for the Master's use. A primary reason God allows periods of breaking is profoundly simple yet deeply impactful. Brokenness serves as a divine alarm, shocking us awake to what truly, eternally matters. We naturally build comfort zones, fortresses of routine, achievement, and self-reliance. While these can feel secure, they are often illusions built on a foundation of our own limited strength. Brokenness, then, acts like a divine sledgehammer, not of wrath, but of purposeful love, to shatter these facades. It forcibly pulls us from our self-made sanctuaries into the stark light of ultimate reality. Imagine your life as a smoothly sailing ship, you at the helm, confident in your course. Suddenly, a tempest. Your plans are irrelevant, your sails torn, your mast of self-reliance cracking. This is breaking. The illusion of your control shatters. It's in this violent disruption, when familiar supports crumble, career, reputation, even relationships, that you desperately seek something solid. And amidst the wreckage, you begin to perceive the one unshakable foundation, God Himself. The psalmist wrote, "It was good for me to be afflicted, so that I might learn your decrees." Psalm 119-71, 9v. How can affliction be good? Because it strips away the superficial, forcing us to confront the eternal. When our personal kingdoms collapse, we are finally positioned to see the unshakable kingdom of God. This is a key aspect of the intentional breaking cycle. God doesn't just passively observe our struggles. When pride and self-sufficiency blind us, He may intentionally allow circumstances that break these reliances. Consider Jacob, a man famed for his self-reliant cunning. His wrestling match at Peniel, culminating in a dislocated hip, Genesis 32-25, was a deliberate breaking. He left limping, forever marked, but also transformed, bearing a new name, Israel, and a profound understanding of his utter dependence on God. His greatest spiritual breakthrough emerged from his point of physical collapse. Therefore, this pain isn't pointless torment. It's a severe mercy, an instrument to open your eyes. When the glare of worldly success dims and the noise of earthly ambitions fades, you can finally perceive the eternal truths previously obscured. The value of integrity over image, genuine connection over superficiality, and faith over fortune becomes starkly clear. Brokenness is a harsh but effective teacher. It reorders our priorities. Things once passionately pursued may now seem hollow. This isn't to condemn earthly blessings, but when they become idols, usurping God's place, they become dangerous. The hammer of brokenness shatters these idols, not to leave us empty, but to create space for God Himself, the only truly satisfying reality. The divine crack effect illustrates this. The initial shattering is painful. But as the dust settles, these cracks in our self-assurance become openings for God's light. Through these acknowledged vulnerabilities, we learn His ways, understand His heart, and see His hand not just in history's grand narratives, but in the intimate, painful, and redemptive details of our own broken lives. The pain clarifies our vision, burning away self-deception, revealing God as the sole unshakable rock in a transient world. It's an awakening, however unwelcome, to what truly endures. Another critical reason for divine breaking is this. It acts as God's surgical intervention, meticulously cutting away things that are subtly poisoning or destroying us. This is often painful because these attachments, be they relationships, ambitions, or habits, can be things we deeply cherish, even if they are detrimental to our spiritual well-being. We often lack the will or clarity to remove them ourselves, so God, in His profound love, performs the necessary, albeit painful, surgery. Jesus used the metaphor of a gardener pruning a vine in John 15:2. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. NIV. Pruning, which involves cutting away even seemingly healthy parts, can look destructive. But the experienced gardener knows it's essential for greater health and fruitfulness. God, the divine gardener, sees what we don't and prunes us for a more abundant spiritual harvest. What might He need to sever? First, toxic relationships. These can be insidious, cloaked in affection or obligation, yet consistently drain spiritual vitality, encourage compromise, or foster unhealthy dependence. They might be friendships that mock faith, romantic entanglements misaligned with God's standards, or dysfunctional family dynamics. God may orchestrate circumstances a painful parting, a necessary separation to sever these soul-draining ties. The initial grief is real, but the space created allows for healthier connections and spiritual flourishing. Second, pride-inducing careers or ambitions that make us forget our true identity in Him. Success isn't inherently bad, but when a job or achievement becomes our primary identity, inflating our ego and diminishing our reliance on God, it becomes a dangerous idol. A career setback, a public humbling, or job loss can feel catastrophic. Yet, in the ruins of that professional identity, God offers the chance to rediscover our true worth, founded not on what we do, but on whose we are. This breaking frees us from the pressure to perform, allowing us to rebuild on Christ. Third, God often cuts away our cherished carnal dreams that obscure His far grander, divine plans. Our self-made blueprints for life, even if seemingly noble, can be too small, too earthly, compared to His eternal purposes. Our good plan can be the enemy of His best. He might allow circumstances that derail these dreams a closed door, an unexpected detour. This can feel like a betrayal of hope, but it's often in the shattering of our limited visions that we become open to His breathtaking heavenly calling, which promises eternal significance over temporal success. This cutting away is part of a deliberate breaking cycle. It's targeted. God identifies hindrances to our spiritual growth and acts, often in ways that seem severe. The pain of this detachment is genuine. However, the principle is crucial. Sometimes God must remove the good to make space for the excellent, the better for the best. He sees the bigger picture and our potential for greater fruitfulness, which is often choked by lesser attachments. This removal, while initially creating a void, also creates spiritual pause, making us more receptive to His grace and spirit. Like a sculptor chipping away stone to reveal the masterpiece within, God removes parts of us. It seems destructive, but He sees the final, beautiful form that can only be revealed through subtraction. This painful extraction is not to diminish us, but to refine and free us, enabling us to run our race with endurance and bear more fruit for His glory. The purpose is profoundly loving, to liberate us into the fullness of life He intends. Beyond the pain of shattered illusions and severed attachments, a profound transformation often takes root in the fertile soil of brokenness. It cultivates a heart that is finally still enough, quiet enough, and desperate enough to truly listen to the voice of God. In the relentless hustle and clamor of our everyday lives, God's voice, often a gentle whisper, is easily drowned out. We are bombarded by the noise of our own ambitions, the demands of our schedules, the cacophony of societal expectations, and the seductive applause or stinging criticism of the crowd. Our spiritual ears become dulled, attuned more to the frequency of the world than to the frequency of the Spirit. But when the breaking comes, much of this external and internal noise is forcibly silenced. The career that consumed your thoughts may be gone. The relationships that filled your time with chatter may have shifted or ended. The pursuits that once drove you with relentless energy may now seem hollow or impossible. In this newfound, often uncomfortable stillness and solitude, something remarkable happens. The subtle, persistent voice of God begins to emerge from the background, becoming clearer, more discernible, more insistent than ever before. It's a principle beautifully illustrated in the life of the prophet Elijah. In 1 Kings 19, Elijah is at a breaking point. He has just experienced a mighty victory over the prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel, yet he finds himself fleeing for his life from Queen Jezebel, despondent and alone in the wilderness, even praying for death. He retreats to a cave on Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, and there God seeks to communicate with him. The narrative is striking. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord, but the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. 1 Kings 19:11-12, Nive. God chose not to speak through the dramatic, overwhelming displays of power, the wind, the earthquake, the fire, the very kinds of manifestations that often accompany his presence. Instead, he spoke to his broken, weary prophet in a gentle whisper or a still small voice in some translations. This is profoundly significant. Elijah had to be stripped of his triumphant public persona, isolated from the throngs, brought to a place of utter desolation and quiet, before he could truly hear that crucial, course-correcting whisper from God. When the grand stages are dismantled, when the cheering or jeering crowds disperse, when the dramatic events subside, it is then, in the raw quietude of our vulnerability, that our ears become attuned to the delicate nuances of God's voice. The sound of sheer silence, as some translations render it, becomes the sacred space for divine communication. In our own seasons of brokenness, we are often forced into a similar cave. It might be a literal sickbed, a period of unemployment, a season of relational isolation, or simply the quiet, echoing space left by loss. Initially, this silence can be deafening, even terrifying. We are accustomed to the noise, to the distractions. But if we can resist the urge to immediately fill that void with more noise, if we can lean into the stillness, we create an unparalleled opportunity to hear from God. It's in these quiet, stripped-down moments that he often speaks most profoundly about our true identity, his unwavering love, and the unique path he has for us. When we are no longer preoccupied with maintaining an image or chasing external validation or managing the complexities of a life overcrowded with our own agendas, we can finally hear his gentle guidance, his words of comfort, his invitations to a deeper relationship. The superficial concerns fall away and the eternal truths resonate with newfound clarity. God sometimes has to engineer a holy hush in our lives. He allows the props to be knocked away, the background music to fade, not to punish us, but to draw us into a more intimate conversation. He desires for us to hear not just the general principles of his word, but the specific, whispered directives for our next steps, the comforting reassurances for our weary souls, and the grand, often surprising, visions he has for our seemingly ruined futures. This doesn't mean God only speaks in brokenness, but that brokenness often creates the optimal conditions for us to receive his communication. It attunes our hearts to a different frequency. The divine crack effect here is that the fractures in our busy lives create openings for his still, small voice to penetrate the hardened layers of self-sufficiency and distraction. Our brokenness becomes a sacred sound booth, amplifying his whisper above the fading din of the world. Therefore, if you find yourself in a season of unnerving quiet, don't rush to escape it. Instead, listen, lean in, for it may be that God is silencing the world around you precisely so that you can hear his life-altering whisper about the great future he is preparing. As the layers of our former lives are stripped away by the relentless refining process of brokenness, we inevitably arrive at a stark, often terrifying moment of realization. The illusion of our own sovereignty, the deeply ingrained belief that we are in control of our destinies, is utterly and irrevocably shattered. This is a pivotal juncture in the journey of faith, a moment where the carefully constructed edifice of self-rule comes crashing down, leaving us standing amidst the rubble of our own perceived omnipotence. For much of our lives, especially in cultures that champion individualism and self-reliance, we operate under the tacit assumption that we are the captains of our ships, the masters of our fates. We make plans, set goals, exert effort, and when things go according to our designs, we credit our intelligence, our diligence, our foresight. We meticulously arrange the pieces of our lives, career, finances, relationships, health, believing that with enough skill and determination, we can maintain order, predict outcomes, and steer clear of significant disruption. This sense of control can be intoxicating, providing a comforting, albeit false, sense of security. Then comes the breaking. It might be a sudden, devastating illness that mocks our careful health regimens. It could be an unforeseen economic downturn that decimates our meticulously saved finances. Perhaps it's the betrayal of a trusted friend that shatters our belief in our ability to judge character, or the waywardness of a child, despite our most devoted parenting efforts. In these moments, the carefully drawn lines of our control blur and then vanish. We pull the levers, push the buttons, and discover with dawning horror that nothing is responding as it should. The script we wrote for our lives is being dramatically, painfully rewritten by a hand far greater, far more sovereign than our own. This is the moment of naked awareness, the gut-wrenching admission. I am not in control of anything truly significant. The illusion of self-mastery, which once provided such a powerful, though ultimately deceptive, sense of agency, evaporates like mist in the morning sun. This realization can initially plunge us into a state of profound anxiety, even despair. If I'm not in control, then who is? And if I can't dictate the outcomes, what's the point of striving, of planning, of hoping? It can feel like an utter, abject failure, a complete loss of personal power. But here lies one of the most profound paradoxes of the spiritual life. This perceived failure, this stripping away of self-sovereignty, is not the end of strength, but the beginning of true, unshakable freedom. It is liberation from the crushing, exhausting, and ultimately impossible burden of trying to be the god of our own lives. The constant pressure to manage every variable, to anticipate every contingency, to ensure every outcome aligns with our desires. This is a weight no human soul was ever designed to bear. When brokenness forces us to relinquish this self-imposed godhood, it opens the door to a profound and unexpected peace. The Apostle Paul, a man of immense intellect, drive, and accomplishment, learned this lesson through his own thorn in the flesh. We don't know the exact nature of this affliction, but it was something that caused him great distress, something he repeatedly prayed for God to remove. God's answer, however, was not deliverance from the weakness, but a revelation through it. As Paul recounts in 2 Corinthians 12-9, NIV, "But he said to me, 'My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. My power is made perfect in weakness.'" This is the divine equation that confounds human logic. Our culture screams, "Be strong, be independent, overcome." God whispers, "Be weak, that I may be strong in you. Be dependent, that you may discover the limitless resources of my grace." When we finally reach the end of our own resources, when our own strength is utterly depleted, when our carefully constructed plans lie in ruins, it is precisely then that we create the space for God's power to operate in its fullness. This is not a call to passivity or irresponsibility. It is a call to a radical reorientation of our reliance. We still plan, we still work, we still strive, but we do so with a profound understanding that the ultimate outcome rests in God's hands, not ours. We release the frantic grip of control and learn to walk in dependent faith, trusting that His wisdom, His love, and His power are infinitely greater than our own. This principle of sacred relinquishment is a key aspect of how God uses brokenness. He allows the props of our self-reliance to be knocked out from under us, so that we will finally learn to lean entirely on Him. When you realize you cannot heal yourself, you turn to the great physician with a new desperation. When you realize you cannot secure your future, you entrust it to the one who holds all your tomorrows. When you realize you cannot change the hearts of others, you intercede with a new fervency, knowing that only God can do the impossible. The breaking of our illusion of control is not about making us feel small and insignificant in a negative sense. Rather, it's about right-sizing us in the grand scheme of His sovereignty. It is an invitation to exchange the fragile, anxiety-ridden throne of self-rule for the secure, peace-filled position of a beloved child, utterly dependent on a perfect, all-powerful Father. The divine crack effect here manifests as the shattering of the ego's proud fortress. The cracks in our self-sufficiency become gaping holes through which God's overwhelming strength and grace can pour in. When you are utterly convinced of your inability, His ability shines brightest. When you confess, "I can't," He lovingly responds, "I can." When you whisper, "I am at my wit's end," His infinite wisdom begins to unfold. This is not defeat. It is the most profound victory, the victory of surrender, the victory that ushers in the reign of God's power in the very places where our own strength has failed. Your brokenness, then, becomes the very stage upon which His perfect strength is most gloriously displayed. Out of the smouldering ashes of our broken dreams, out of the disorienting collapse of our self-made worlds, something incredibly powerful and profoundly beautiful can be born. An unshakable, divinely forged purpose. Those who have navigated the crucible of deep suffering, who have been refined in the fiercest fires of affliction, often emerge not with bitterness, but with a breathtaking clarity about why they are here and what they are called to do. This isn't a purpose cobbled together from fleeting ambitions or societal expectations. It is a purpose seared into the very core of their being. A purpose that transcends personal gain and aligns with the eternal heartbeat of God. Before the breaking, our sense of purpose can often be vague, shifting, or tethered to superficial achievements. We might believe our purpose is to climb the corporate ladder, to accumulate wealth, to gain recognition, or to achieve a certain lifestyle. These are not inherently wrong, but when they form the entirety of our why, they are fragile foundations, easily shaken by life's inevitable storms. When these external markers are stripped away, when the job is lost, the wealth diminishes, the applause fades, we can be left feeling adrift, purposeless, and utterly lost. However, the divine breaking process has a way of burning away all that is superficial, all that is extraneous, all the layers of false identity and misguided ambition we've accumulated. It's like a refiner's fire, which doesn't destroy the precious metal, but purges away the dross, the impurities, leaving behind something pure, valuable, and resilient. What remains after this intense purification is an authentic core. You, raw and real, God in His undeniable presence, and a nascent, often startlingly clear, understanding of the unique, eternal purpose He has woven into the fabric of your existence. The Apostle Paul, whose life was a tapestry of dramatic breakings and subsequent divine empowerments, speaks to this transformative reality in Romans 8:28, NIV. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him, who have been called according to His purpose. This isn't a Pollyanna-ish platitude, suggesting that all painful things are inherently good in themselves. Rather, it's a profound theological truth. God, in His sovereignty and love, is able to take all things, including our most painful breakings, our deepest sorrows, our most humiliating failures, and weave them together for an ultimate, redemptive good for those who are committed to Him and aligned with His overarching purpose. This good is often the clarification and solidification of our unique calling. The very experiences that seemed designed to destroy us can become the foundational building blocks of our life's most significant work. The pain you endured can become the wellspring of your compassion. The mistakes you made can become the wisdom you share. The wilderness you traversed can become the map you offer to other lost travelers. Consider the anti-fragile saint concept, drawing from Nassim Taleb's idea of anti-fragility, things that not only withstand shocks, but actually become stronger and more capable because of them. This is more than mere resilience bouncing back. It's about being transformed and enhanced by adversity. Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused and imprisoned, endured years of profound breaking. Yet each injustice, each season of suffering, became an unlikely stepping stone in God's promotion system. The prison was not just a place of confinement, but a proving ground for his integrity and administrative gifts. His broken dreams of family acceptance were eventually eclipsed by the reality of saving an entire nation, including the very family that betrayed him. His suffering forged in him the character and perspective necessary for the immense purpose God had ordained. Genesis 50-20. Similarly, David, anointed as a future king, spent years as a fugitive, hiding in caves, betrayed, hunted. These weren't wasted years. The caves of Adullam became his royal training academy, forging his leadership, his reliance on God, and his psalmist's heart. The pressures he endured didn't just create a survivor, they molded a king whose heart was after God's own. Pressure, in God's economy, creates diamonds. Fire doesn't just test gold, it refines it, making it purer and more valuable. And suffering, when surrendered to God's redemptive hand, doesn't just produce endurance, it can birth an eternal, unshakable purpose. This isn't an automatic process. One can emerge from suffering bitter and broken in the destructive sense. But for those who, in their pain, turn towards God rather than away from Him, who seek His face amidst the ashes, the breaking becomes a crucible for purpose. The layers of ego, self-preservation, and shallow ambition are stripped away. What's left is a profound sense of dependence on God and a clearer vision of how one's unique story, with all its scars and triumphs, can be used for His glory and the good of others. The divine crack effect here is that the shattering of our old paradigms, our old dreams, our old selves, creates openings for God to pour in His specific, tailor-made purpose for our lives. The fractures become the fertile ground where the seeds of divine calling can finally take root and flourish, unchoked by the weeds of self-interest or worldly distraction. When you are no longer striving to build your own little kingdom, you become free to be an ambassador for His. This purpose, born out of brokenness, is often characterized by a deep sense of urgency and a selfless desire to serve. Having tasted the depths of pain, there is a profound empathy for others who are suffering. Having experienced God's faithfulness in the pit, there is an unshakable conviction to share that hope. The focus shifts from "what can I get" to "what can I give?" From "how can I be comfortable" to "how can I make a difference?" So, if you are in the midst of a breaking that has left you feeling stripped bare, wondering if your life has any meaning left, take heart. This very emptiness, this painful void, might be the precise space God is clearing to reveal a purpose so profound, so aligned with His eternal plan, that it will dwarf all your previous ambitions. The pain is not the end of your story. It could very well be the painful but necessary labor pains of your truest, most impactful calling. Your greatest agony can be transformed into your greatest assignment. One of the most beautiful and Christ-like transformations that emerges from the often harsh terrain of personal brokenness is the cultivation of a deep, authentic, and profoundly effective compassion for others. There is a powerful, albeit painful truth at play here. You cannot truly, deeply, and effectively bind up the wounds of another human being if you have never bled yourself. It is our own experiences of pain, loss, and vulnerability that plough the fallow ground of our hearts, making them fertile soil for genuine empathy and tender mercy to grow. Before we navigate our own significant trials, our understanding of suffering can be largely theoretical, even abstract. We might feel sympathy, a kind of detached sorrow for those in pain. But genuine empathy, the ability to truly enter into and share the feelings of another, often remains elusive. We might offer well-intentioned platitudes or quick fixes simply because we haven't yet grasped the profound depth and complexity of human anguish from the inside out. Our comfort can feel hollow, our advice superficial, because it lacks the weight of shared experience. But then comes the breaking. Your heart is shattered by grief, your spirit is crushed by betrayal, your body is racked with pain, your hopes are dashed by disappointment. In these moments of profound personal suffering, something shifts. The abstract concept of pain becomes a visceral, lived reality. The easy answers evaporate. The neat, theological boxes we once used to categorize suffering no longer seem adequate. And in this raw, humbling space, a new capacity is born. The capacity to connect with the pain of others on a soul level. Your own tears, shed in the lonely darkness of your Gethsemane, become a sacred well from which you can draw to minister to other weeping souls. The scars you bear, far from being marks of shame, become powerful, silent testimonies of survival and ultimately of God's sustaining grace. They become points of connection, bridges of understanding that span the chasm of isolation that so often surrounds those who are hurting. When you can say, "I know something of what you're feeling. I've walked a similar path," your words carry an authenticity and a healing balm that no amount of theoretical knowledge can replicate. This is powerfully illustrated in the life and ministry of Jesus himself. The book of Hebrews emphasizes this repeatedly. Hebrews 2:18, NIV, states, "Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted." And even more strikingly, Hebrews 5-7-9, NIV, says of Jesus, "During the days of Jesus' life on earth, he offered up prayers and petitions with fervent cries and tears to the one who could save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverent submission. Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered, and once made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation for all who obey him." Son though he was, he learned obedience from what he suffered. If Jesus, the perfect Son of God, learned and was perfected in his human capacity to relate and save through his own suffering, how much more do we, in our inherent frailty, need the refining fire of affliction to shape us into vessels of effective compassion? His suffering wasn't just a theological necessity for atonement, it was also the very means by which he could fully identify with our human condition, becoming the ultimate high priest who can empathize with our weaknesses. Hebrews 4:15, NIV. Our brokenness, then, becomes a profound training ground. It sensitizes us. It softens the hard edges of our judgment and replaces them with the gentle touch of mercy. It dismantles our pride, which so often stands as a barrier to genuine connection, and replaces it with a humble awareness of our shared human frailty. When you have been in the pit, you are far less likely to look down on others who find themselves there. Instead, your instinct is to reach down, to offer a hand, to speak words of hope rooted in your own hard-won experience. This is where the divine crack effect creates conduits for healing. The fissures in our own lives, the places where we have been most deeply wounded, can become the very channels through which God's comfort and healing flow to others. Our pain, redeemed and sanctified, is no longer a wasted agony. It is transformed into a potent medicine for a hurting world. The waste to worship principle is at play here. Our tears become offerings of worship, our scars become sermons of his faithfulness, and the ashes of our former devastation are transformed into the beauty of a compassionate heart. This principle of suffering shared, suffering soothed, is also evident in the broken bread principle, which we will explore more later. Just as Christ's body was broken for us, our own brokenness, when offered to God, can be used to nourish and sustain others. We become wounded healers, our own past pain empowering us to minister with a unique depth and credibility. Think of it. Who would you rather receive counsel from when facing a devastating loss? Someone who has only read about grief in textbooks, or someone who has wept the same bitter tears and somehow found their way back to the light? Who can better understand the struggles of addiction? One who has only observed it from a distance, or one who has fought that demon and, by God's grace, found freedom? The shared experience creates an immediate bond of trust and understanding. Therefore, if you are enduring a season of profound breaking, understand that even in the midst of your pain, God may be forging within you an extraordinary capacity for compassion. He is not wasting your sorrows. He is gathering up every tear, every heartache, every moment of despair, and intending to transmute them into a powerful anointing to comfort and heal. Your journey through the valley of the shadow of death is not just for your own refinement. It is also to equip you to guide others who will inevitably walk that same shadowed path. Your brokenness, then, becomes a sacred qualification for a ministry of profound and life-changing empathy. It's a painful curriculum, but the graduation gift is a heart tenderized and made strong to love like Jesus loved. As God meticulously reshapes us through the crucible of brokenness, another critical and often deeply unsettling divine surgery takes place. He begins to sovereignly separate us from the fleshly dependencies and carnal motivations that contaminate or dilute our true, God-given calling. This is a profound sifting process designed to disentangle our spiritual purpose from the human props, personal ambitions, and worldly allegiances we often mistake for essential supports. Before this divine winnowing, our pursuit of God's will can be subtly, or not so subtly, intertwined with our own agendas. We may desire to serve God, but we also crave recognition. We may want to build His kingdom, but we're also keen on building our own little empires alongside it. We may rely on His strength, but we also lean heavily on our natural talents, our influential connections, our financial resources, or the approval of certain people, treating these as indispensable pillars of our ministry or purpose. These earthly supports can become idols, usurping the place of pure, unadulterated trust in God alone. The breaking process often involves the systematic dismantling or removal of these very props. God, in His wisdom, begins to cut the cords that tie us to these fleshly sources of strength and validation. It might be the loss of a key mentor whose approval you craved. It could be the drying up of a financial resource you deemed essential. Perhaps it's the fading of natural charisma that once opened doors, or the alienation from a supportive network that once formed your power base. These losses can feel catastrophic, as if the very legs are being cut out from under your calling. You may feel exposed, vulnerable, and utterly ill-equipped. This is precisely the point. God is intentionally leading you to a place where your reliance shifts definitively from the seen to the unseen, from the human to the divine, from your resources to His inexhaustible supply. He is teaching you that your true calling is not dependent on who you know, what you possess, or how gifted you are in your own strength. It is dependent solely on Him, His power, His provision, His anointing. John the Baptist articulated this principle with stark clarity when speaking of Jesus. He must become greater, I must become less. John 3:30, NIV. This isn't just a statement of humility. It's a profound spiritual dynamic that God often engineers in the lives of those He intends to use powerfully. The I, with its self-interests, its pride, its dependence on fleshly means, must diminish so that Christ and the pure calling He imparts can increase and shine forth unobscured. This hidden preparation phase often involves seasons of obscurity, of being sidelined, of feeling forgotten. Think of Moses, raised in the palaces of Egypt, a man of education and influence. After killing the Egyptian, he spent 40 years in the desolate wilderness of Midian, tending sheep, a stark demotion in worldly terms. This was a period of profound breaking, stripping away his Egyptian identity, his self-reliance, his impulsive anger. It was in this 40-year seminary of solitude that God prepared him for his true calling, to lead the Israelites out of bondage. He had to be separated from the flesh of Egypt, from its power structures and its wisdom, to become a vessel wholly dependent on Jehovah. This separation can be agonizing because it often involves the loss of things we've come to define ourselves by. Our skills, our networks, our reputation, these can become so intertwined with our sense of purpose that their removal feels like a spiritual amputation. But God is performing a necessary detachment. He wants to ensure that when He moves through you, the glory goes to Him alone, not to your cleverness, your connections, or your charisma. The intentional breaking cycle is evident here. God isn't just waiting for these fleshly props to fall away naturally. He often actively orchestrates their removal. He might allow circumstances that expose the unreliability of human support systems. He might lead you into situations where your natural talents are utterly insufficient, forcing you to cry out for His supernatural empowerment. He's purging the leaven of self-glory from your offering. A true God-birthed calling often only crystallizes and comes to full power after this stripping process is well underway, after your desire for personal vindication or self-aggrandizement has been crucified. When you no longer need the applause, when you are willing to be misunderstood, when your primary desire is God's glory rather than your own comfort or reputation, then you are becoming a candidate for a deeper level of kingdom impact. The divine crack effect in this context is the breaking away of the outer shell of self-reliance and fleshly ambition, revealing the purer, more authentic core of God's implanted purpose. The cracks become the lines of demarcation between what is of you and what is of Him. This separation is vital because God's power flows most freely through channels that are unclogged by ego and self-interest. This process distinguishes between a career and a calling. A career can be built on talent and ambition. A calling is often forged in the fires of brokenness and marked by a profound sense of dependence on God and a singular desire for His purposes to be fulfilled. When the I dies, its need for control, its craving for approval, its reliance on earthly crutches, the divine He can truly live and reign through you. Your personal insignificance becomes the stage for His infinite significance. It's in this sacred exchange, this painful but liberating separation, that the fleshly is traded for the eternal and a human ambition is transformed into a divine assignment. The breaking ensures that when you speak, it's His voice that's heard. When you act, it's His power that's seen. As we near the culmination of understanding God's profound purposes in our breaking, we arrive at a principle that radiates with hope and astonishing divine logic. God never breaks to discard. He breaks to your season of being undone, of feeling fragmented and poured out, is often the sacred preparation for being used to nourish and bless countless others in ways you could never achieve in your unbroken, self-contained state. This is perhaps one of the most counterintuitive yet consistently demonstrated truths in God's economy. Our human instinct, when something is broken, is to see it as diminished, less valuable, perhaps even useless. A broken cup holds less. A broken tool performs poorly. But in God's hands, brokenness becomes the prerequisite for an explosion of blessing, a divine multiplication that defies earthly mathematics. The most poignant and powerful illustration of this principle is found in the actions of Jesus Himself, particularly in the feeding of the multitudes. Consider the account in John 6:11, NIV. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. Before the miraculous multiplication that fed over 5,000 men, plus women and children, with just 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, there was a crucial act. Jesus took the bread, He gave thanks, blessed it, and then He broke it. Only after the breaking did the distribution and the miracle of multiplication occur. The bread had to be broken, to be shared. If it had remained whole, intact, it could have satisfied only one or a few. But broken, it became the means of sustenance for a vast crowd. This isn't just a historical event, it's a living parable of how God works in and through the lives of His children. He takes us, with our limited resources, our finite abilities. He consecrates us, sets us apart for His purposes, the giving of thanks. And then, often, He allows or orchestrates a breaking, a breaking of our pride, our self-sufficiency, our carefully constructed plans. It is in that state of brokenness, when we feel inadequate and insufficient, that He can then use us to distribute His grace, His love, His truth, His provision to a spiritually hungry world. Your personal breaking, therefore, is not the end of your usefulness. It is often the very beginning of your most significant impact. The divine crack effect here is not just about light shining through the cracks, but about the very substance of your life, refined through suffering, being broken apart so it can be shared more widely. The experiences, the lessons learned in the crucible, the empathy forged in pain, these become the loaves and fish that God multiplies. Think of the anti-fragile saint once more. Joseph's years of breaking, betrayal, slavery, false imprisonment were not just for his personal character development. They were the very experiences that positioned and equipped him to save nations from famine. His broken life was multiplied into life for multitudes. David's Psalms, many born from periods of intense personal anguish and brokenness, have nourished and sustained souls for millennia. His personal pain, broken open through poetry and prayer, has been multiplied into comfort and hope for generations. This principle also connects deeply with the death before multiplication concept found in John 12:24. Niv. Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. The death here often refers to the death of our own agenda, our ego, our self-will, a process intrinsically linked to profound breaking. When we are willing to be broken and die to ourselves, we cease to be isolated units and instead become conduits for a harvest of spiritual life in others. Our willingness to be poured out, like a broken vessel, allows the living water within to flow to a thirsty world. This is not a call to seek out suffering, but an encouragement to understand God's redemptive power within it. When breaking comes, and we surrender to His process, we are positioned for a kind of spiritual fission, where our one life, once broken open, releases an energy and influence far beyond its original, self-contained capacity. Consider the modern applications. A business person whose company catastrophically fails, a breaking, might, through that experience, discover a calling to mentor other struggling entrepreneurs with a depth of wisdom and empathy they never possessed during their successful years. Their failure, once broken and offered to God, is multiplied into the success and encouragement of many. A person who endures the heartbreak of a shattered marriage, a breaking, might emerge with a profound capacity to counsel and support others navigating similar pain. Their personal tragedy multiplied into healing for countless relationships. An individual who battles through the darkness of addiction and finds recovery, a breaking followed by restoration, becomes an incredibly powerful instrument of hope. Their story multiplied to inspire and guide others still trapped. This is the sacred scrap principle in action, God taking what the world, and sometimes we ourselves, might deem as ruined, as scrap, and repurposing it for glorious multiplication. He doesn't waste our pain. He doesn't waste our broken pieces. He gathers them up, blesses them, and uses them to feed the hungry, to comfort the grieving, to guide the lost. So, if you feel like you are being broken into a million pieces, if you feel like your resources are laughably small in the face of overwhelming need, remember the 5 loaves and 2 fish. Remember that in the hands of the Master, your brokenness is not a liability. It is the preparation for an extraordinary multiplication. He is not intending to leave you in fragments. He is preparing to take those very fragments and use them to touch, heal, and nourish a multitude of souls. Your breaking is not for annihilation. It is the sacred prelude to an outpouring, an expansion, a divine increase that will bring glory to His name and profound blessing to the world around you. Your life, once broken and offered, becomes an ever-expanding feast. We have journeyed through the often shadowed valleys of divine breaking, exploring the profound, multifaceted reasons why the God of all comfort sometimes allows, and even orchestrates, seasons where our lives seem to shatter into 1,000 pieces. We've seen that this breaking is not a sign of his displeasure or abandonment, but rather a complex, deeply intentional process of preparation, purification, and empowerment. It is the sacred signature of a master potter reshaping the clay, a divine gardener pruning for greater fruitfulness, a heavenly Father lovingly disciplining his children for their ultimate good and his ultimate glory. From the startling awakening to what truly matters, to the severing of soul-destroying attachments, from the cultivation of a listening heart, to the demolition of self-rule illusions, from the birthing of unshakable purpose to the tenderizing of our hearts for profound compassion, from the crucial separation of fleshly reliance from true calling to the astonishing preparation for divine multiplication. Each facet of this breaking process reveals a God who is intimately involved, infinitely wise, and unrelentingly loving, even when his methods feel severe. This is the blessed breaking. It is a holy paradox where our deepest points of fracture become the very places where God's glory can most brilliantly shine, where our greatest weaknesses become the conduits for his unparalleled strength. The divine crack effect isn't just a theory. It's a lived reality for countless souls across generations who have found their most profound encounters with God and their most significant assignments from him in the aftermath of their deepest wounds. The kintsugi art form, where broken pottery is mended with gold, becomes a living metaphor. Our scars, when touched by his grace, become luminous testimonies to his redeeming power, making us more beautiful and valuable, not in spite of our brokenness, but precisely because of it. So now, we stand at a point of profound challenge and glorious invitation. If you are currently in a season of breaking, if your world is shaking and your foundations feel like they are giving way, do not be afraid. This is not the end. This is not a cosmic accident. You are not being discarded. Instead, understand this with every fiber of your being. God is likely molding you, shaping you, preparing you for a weight of glory, for a purpose so significant that no unbroken, untested version of you could possibly bear it. He is forging in you a resilience, a depth of character, and an anointing that can only be birthed in the crucible of surrendered suffering. The critical question now becomes, how will you respond to the divine hammer, the sacred chisel? First, you are called to surrender. Do not fight the process. Our natural instinct is to resist pain, to struggle against the dismantling, to try and piece ourselves back together with our own failing strength. But in this divine breaking, resistance is futile and counterproductive. It only prolongs the agony and can hinder the work God is trying to accomplish. Surrender is not resignation to defeat. It is an active yielding to a higher, wiser, and infinitely more loving will. It is opening your hands and saying, Lord, I don't understand this, I don't like this, but I trust you. Have your way. Second, you are called to trust. Do not despair. In the darkness of breaking, despair can be a seductive companion, whispering lies of hopelessness and abandonment. But faith is the anchor that holds in the storm. Trust that the God who began this good work in you will bring it to completion. Philippians 1-6. Trust that his plans for you are for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. Jeremiah 29-11. Trust that even when you cannot trace his hand, you can always trust his heart. His love for you has not wavered. Third, you are called to be patient. Do not rush the potter's work. The remaking process takes time. Just as a diamond is formed under immense pressure over long periods, so too spiritual maturity and true anointing are often developed slowly, meticulously, in the hidden seasons of breaking. Resist the urge to prematurely escape the process or to demand instant understanding or relief. Allow God the time he needs to do his deep, transformative work. His timing is always perfect. The final, powerful truth to embrace is this. In the hands of the Almighty God, your brokenness is not a full stop. It is a comma, a sacred pause before the beginning of a new, more glorious chapter. It is the prelude to a purpose that is eternal, the opening scene of a grand narrative that only you, in your uniquely broken and remade state, can write to His glory. Let this resonate deep within your spirit. The individuals God has used most powerfully throughout history have often been those who were broken most profoundly. Think of Abraham, wrestling with decades of childlessness, Jacob, limping from his divine encounter, Joseph, shattered by betrayal and injustice, Moses, humbled in the desert, David, crushed by sin and grief, Jeremiah, the weeping prophet, Peter, broken by his denial, Paul, afflicted with his thorn. Their breaking was not their disqualification, it was their divine qualification. Their deepest wounds became the wellsprings of their greatest impact. So, if you see the fragments of your life scattered around you, do not weep as those who have no hope. Instead, look up, for the Master's hand is upon you. He is gathering those pieces, not to merely restore what was, but to create something new, something breathtaking, something far more glorious than you can currently imagine. This journey from brokenness to belovedness, from shattered to shining, from fragmented to fruitful, this is the signature of our God. It is the scandalous, upside-down wisdom of the kingdom, where the way down is the way up, where weakness is the doorway to true power, and where being utterly undone is the prelude to an unprecedented anointing. Are you willing to submit to the blessed breaking? Are you ready to allow Him to transform your deepest fractures into facets that reflect His magnificent light? Your breaking is not a curse. It is the overture to an anointing you never dreamed possible. Embrace it, trust Him through it, and watch as He turns your deepest pain into your most profound purpose, your greatest mess into your most powerful message. From broken to brilliant, that is the divine trajectory He has for you.